This is Ryan with GameRoomSolutions.com, and today I'm going to show you how to configure a USB spinner to not interfere with your USB trackball within RetroPie. Okay, to get started here, we have to make sure that our emulators is enabled for a mouse. Essentially, whether you're configuring a trackball or a spinner, they're going to show up as a mouse or interpret as a mouse in the emulator. So with MAME 2003, 2010, and advmame are the ones that support the mouse or trackball and spinner. So what we want to do is get your IP address, get your Pi on the network. Mine's 36 here. Just do backback, put in your IP address, or backback RetroPie should work as well. And what we want to do first is go into our configs folder, the all folder, and then we want to go to retroarch-core-options. We want to open that. I do it with Notepad++ because it just lays everything out a lot better where you can read it instead of standard Notepad. That's free, so just go out and download it to make this easier. And the first thing you want to do is there'll be a MAME 2003 current mouse enable. Make sure that says enabled. Then copy it and put it on another line, and then add a 2010 as well. This is what I did, and it worked on both. Once you do that, save that back to the Pi, and we'll make a few more changes. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to use a program called Putty. It's free. You can just Google it and get Putty. This is going to allow us to SSH right into our Pi. So I'm going to put in my IP address again. It'll open up, and then your username is Pi, and your password is Raspberry. And that's how you log into it. So this is essentially your terminal interface. It looks like an old DOS interface, but this is your terminal interface into your Pi itself. And what we're going to want to do, what we're doing here is we're just going to determine how the system is seeing our mouse, and if we have a trackball or our spinner, and how the system sees that. So essentially what we're going to want to do, and I'll have this in the description, is type in, you can just right click to paste, but cd /dev/input. And then what we're going to want to do is ls -la. And this is going to list all the devices. So you can see here I have my two joysticks, and then I have two different mouses. I guess two different mice, but mouse 0 and mouse 1, right? So what we're going to do here is type in cat mouse 0. I'm going to press enter, and then what I'm going to do now is you can turn your spinner and move your trackball just barely. I'm moving my trackball right now, and you can see that mouse 0 is my trackball. So now that I know that, I can hit Control C. That'll exit out of that. Then I want to do the same thing, but this time I want to see what's on the 1. So I'll do mouse 1, press enter, and this should be my spinner. So you can see there as I'm moving my spinner, it's showing me that's what it is. So I can Control C out of that. That could just type exit. We're done here. So now we know that our trackball is coming in as mouse 0 and our spinner is coming in as mouse 1. Okay, so now I've moved over to my Raspberry Pi setup here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a game that I want to configure the spinner for. So, oops, I got to go to all. So I'll go in the arcade folder. This is all of my arcade games. So I'll go to the all. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to Arkanoid. So you can see Arkanoid right here. I'm going to go ahead and boot that game. Okay, so once it boots up, I'm going to go ahead and add a couple coins and hit start. This game takes a second to start here, but just to show you, I have my trackball configured across both MAME 2003 and 2010 as default for the mouse. So you can see here that that's controlling it, that's working, but the spinner itself is not. So whenever it starts up here, you can see there's nothing happening when the spinner goes. So what I want to do is go into my RetroArch config. So on that, you're going to want to hold your hotkey, which mine's mode, and the X button, which mine is the top center. You can see here that I'm running MAME 2010 on this current ROM. My navigation buttons are these two bottom ones here. So what I want to do is hit back, and then I want to go over and down to input, and then I'm going to go down to user input, user 1 binds, input user 1 binds. Press forward and go down, and you'll see here, oh, let me back up real quick. The first thing you're going to do is go into your configure it. Nope, sorry. Go in your go into the quick menu, go to options, and make sure mouse enabled is set to on. So quick menu options, mouse enabled on. So I'm going to back out again. Now I'm going to go to that user input binds. So user one input binds. And you can see here the mouse index. Now that's what we've looked up at the first. It's set to 0, so that's my trackball. I should be able to set it to 1, but I'll tell you, when I set it to 1 here, it didn't work. For some reason, I had to set it to 2. So you might have to troubleshoot a little bit, but essentially, that's where you're going to change from which USB mouse device you want to use here. Now this is important. I'm going to back out of here. Now I'm going to go to resume. And you can see here now that the spinner is working. So we haven't actually saved the spinner, that mouse, or the bind to, into the file, and I'm going to show you how to do that a little later in the video. But what this did do is it verified that the number 2 is correct for the spinner. So I have 0 for the mouse and 2 for the spinner, and we'll need that number for a little later in the video. Okay, so what we're going to do here is now that we know that the bind 2 is our spinner and 0 is our mouse or our trackball, we need to come in here and set up the specific games that we want to use the spinner instead of the trackball. So to do that, that Arkanoid, whenever I went into RetroArch, was running MAME 2010, and I'll show you how to switch those a little later in the video. But what we want to do is go to your Raspberry Pi, go in Configs, All, RetroArch, Config, and then whichever emulator you have using for that game, go into that folder. So for this one, it's MAME 2010, and then I'll find the Arkanoid. And if there isn't a file here it is right here. If there isn't a file, then you can just create a text file that's called arkanoid.config, whatever the ROM name is. And later in the video, I'll show you an easy way to find out the ROM name too. But so what I'm going to do is open this up, and I've already added it here. This stuff was already in here based on the image that I had. This is how it knows to use certain bezels or certain things within the configuration. But what I added was this line here, and I'll put it in the description. Input player 1 mouse index equals 2. So when it boots this game, first thing it's going to do is look at this config in the MAME 2010 folder, and it's going to automatically set that for me for this game every time. So I have 0 is set as the default across all of the games. So that's for my trackball. So for this, I just needed that set to 2. I'll save that, and then now every time I boot into that game, it'll use this value here. One more thing I want to show you here is for some reason, so I went through and started looking at games that support spinners so I could start manually moving those games over. But the next game I have on here is Mad Planets, or the next game that I went to configure. Here it is right here. And what I want to show you is whenever I boot into this game, I believe this game on this image setup is actually running the FBA or FB Alpha, and that doesn't support any kind of mouse or trackball. So what you can do is just again hold down hotkey and hit the X, and when it comes up it can tell you, so this one's running FB Alpha. This isn't going to work, so I need to change this to use a different emulator. Now on some Raspberry Pi builds, it's as simple as you can just have a keyboard plugged in, or you can just navigate with this, but as soon as you boot, you can press a button and you can switch it to MAME 2003 or 2010 by just pressing a button right as you're starting to boot the game. This one's kind of hard-coded into the emulator, so we'll go back over to the computer and I will show you how to do, I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so I'm back over on the computer here, and I want to go back to my RetroPie. So again, / RetroPie, or the IP address. And we want to go into the configs folder, and then the all folder. And what we're going to do is there's a file called Emulators.cfg. So I'm going to right click that, and I'm going to edit it with Notepad++. So again, it's going to pull all of this up. So what you want to do, one thing I guess it is still nice about Emu Paradise, even though they no longer have ROMs, is I can type in the name of the game, the word ROM, and then when it comes up, you can actually use this. If you go to where the download link is, right here, you can use this just to figure out what the actual name of the ROM itself is. So this is M Planets for the Mad Planets. So when I go back over in this file here, I can do a quick search. a quick search for that, find the ROM, oops, and you can see there it's the FBA or FB Alpha. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to change that to 2010. If that didn't work, I'd change it to 2003 and so on, but 2010 should work on a majority of those like that. All I'm going to do is paste that and save it, and then we'll go back over and we can boot the game back on the Pi. So I went in and made the change to a custom config file just for the Mad Planets ROM and added that line of code for the input 2. And so we'll go ahead and boot into this game. And just to show you that it is running MAME 2010. So it's booted up here. Again, we'll hit the hotkey and the X button. And you can see in the bottom left, it's MAME 2010. So I got credits. You can see the trackball doesn't do anything, but the spinner does. So as I'm shooting here, the spinner's working as expected. So that's it. There's a little bit of configuration going into getting everything playing nice within RetroPie. It's really not that hard. Once someone explains it to you like this, it's a little bit more difficult when you're digging on the internet. So make sure and like the video, visit GameRoomSolutions.com, and thank you.